Well, welcome back to Aging is Direction. I'm Cathy Clements, your longevity strategist, and I'm really glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about something that sits quietly in the back of many people's minds. In fact, I would argue that it's one of the biggest fears people carry as they walk through the second half of life. It's not losing strength or not gaining weight or even not getting older, but it's losing themselves, losing their memory, losing their sharpness, forgetting names, forgetting conversations, and walking into a room and wondering, what did I come in here for in the first place? All of us have done that. And if you've ever had one of those moments, you're not alone. In fact, if you're listening and you're over 50, you've probably experienced it. You've walked into the kitchen and you stop, you look around, and you're like, I suddenly have no clue why I'm here. So a few minutes later, it comes back to you. And immediately, your mind starts asking questions. Is this normal? Should I be worried? Is this how it starts? Today, I want a calm, honest conversation about brain health. I'm going to say that again. Today, I want a calm, honest conversation about brain health, not fear, not panic, not doom and gloom, just understanding. Because the brain is not something we should ignore. But it's also not something we should constantly fear. And here's the message I want you to carry throughout this entire episode and longer. Your brain is influenced by how you live. So let's start with some good news. For many years, scientists believed that the brain was mostly fixed, that you got what you got, and then it slowly declined. Thankfully, we know this isn't true. The brain is remarkably adaptable. It changes, it learns, it creates new connections, it responds to challenge, it responds to movement, it responds to sleep, it responds to relationships, it responds to stress. These are things we've all been talking about. So as we go through them, I want you to think about them as you're thinking about them again, this time in relation to your brain. So movement, sleep, relationships, stress. How about nutrition? The brain is alive. And because it's alive, it responds to how we treat it. That's encouraging or discouraging, depending on how you're treating it, because it means today's choices matter. Normal aging versus disease, dis-ease. Okay, let's think of it that way. One of the most important distinctions we need to make is the difference between normal aging and disease. Normal aging may include taking longer to remember a name, or needing a reminder list, or occasionally misplacing your glasses. I've done that when they're still on my head. Forgetting why you walked in a room. Raise your hand if you've done that. Most of us laugh about those things, but honestly, many happen because we're distracted. We're multitasking. We're overloaded. And we're thinking about 5 or 6 different things all at the same time. That's the difference from losing information completely to having significant cognitive decline. And I think it's important to recognize and realize that difference, because fear itself creates stress, right? And stress affects cognition. Think about that. When you're in a more heightened, stressful environment, you may not be aware of everything, but you're focused solely on what's either bringing you the stress or the situation that you need to remove yourself from. And that's the focus of your brain at that moment. Your brain loves challenges, okay? So, one of the greatest myths about aging is that we should slow down mentally. The truth is just the opposite. The brain thrives on challenge. Think about what happens when you learn something new. All right. Maybe it's technology. That one's a hard one for me. I will tell you, technology, I have to sit down and focus and walk through it very slowly. And then once I can repeat it, I get it, usually much more quickly. But technology, I consider a challenge for me. How about language? That happens to be one of, I don't consider it a hobby because that's a part of my business is having a retreat location in Italy and learning Italian. So language is huge. Does it always come easy? No. I noticed that I don't have the same cognitive ability in the afternoon that I do first thing in the morning. I'm very much a morning person. And I don't have the same cognitive ability the days that I haven't gotten a good night of sleep. So these are things that I've just become aware of as I am learning more about aging and longevity. But think of that. Having hobbies, huge for challenging your brain, or learning a musical instrument. That's not something that I enjoy, but I do enjoy other challenges and taxing my brain in other ways. How about just learning new skills? Maybe you have hobbies that are brand new skills for you, and that challenges your brain. Your brain lights up when it gets to do these things. It's firing off its neurons and it's firing off all these synapses. One of the two, I think it's synapses. And it's making these connections that could be brand new. There's a book out that's called, ah, the name went out of my head, but I know it's on my bookshelf behind me, and I'd have to show it to you later. That I think neuroplasticity. That's the name. And it explains how you can retrain your brain to make different pathways, different connections to things. Um, and it all begins with those new pathways. So keeping your brain active is huge. It's exercise for your brain, just like you exercise your body. So just like any other muscle, it responds to the training. The brain loves a challenge. One of the most powerful things you can do for your brain is to remain curious. We discussed that in prior episodes about making your environment smaller and how that works against you for longevity. So, keeping an expansive environment is something like more friends, more ideas in your head, curious about different things, learning, continuing to learn versus closing down and becoming very sedentary. So keeping your mind just as active as you're trying to keep your body. So curiosity, keeps your mind active. Curiosity keeps you engaged, and curiosity keeps you growing in different things. So just as movement, let's talk about the movement connection. Um, this may surprise you. It surprises a lot of people, but one of the best things you can do for your brain is move your body. Does that sound logical to you? For some people, it doesn't. But in that movement, whether it's walking or strength training, cardiovascular exercise, any kind of mobility work, research continually shows that movement supports brain function. And why is that? It's because movement improves circulation. Go figure. Movement or more circulation means more oxygen in your brain. More oxygen means better support for your brain tissue. And movement stimulates the chemicals that help the brain grow and adapt. This is just one reason that I often say exercise is not just for the body, it's for the brain. Think about the endorphins, the serotonin that's released when you exercise, and how much better you feel after you've gotten, a really good cardiovascular workout in, or you've lifted weights and you just feel, your mood elevates. Those are all things that have to do with oxygen levels in your blood, the stimulation of the muscles in your body, and then the oxygen that has circulated into your brain and is keeping your brain active. And think about this too. We just talked about balance. So in that balance, you just think, a lot of people, not you, a lot of people think that balance is just where I'm positioning my body and um, making it do what I want it to do, stand on one foot, or name whatever that is for balance. Um, your brain has to um, register all of those different things. Oh, I'm standing on one foot. Oh, I'm leaning a little bit forward. Oh, I'm whatever that is. So your brain is constantly involved with any kind of movement that you're doing. So I'd say over the years, I've worked with many clients who initially came because they wanted to lose weight. Um, I think I've had one client that needed to gain weight, but what they noticed first wasn't weight loss, but it was mental clarity and better focus, better moods, more energy, better sleep, more confidence. And that's hugely important. What did we say in the last episode? That capability comes before confidence, and that capability is based on repetitive movements. And I don't mean doing the exact same thing over again, but moving and feeling confident in the movements that you're doing. So, movement, capable of doing the movements, and then the confidence that I can do that, whatever that is. All of that is hugely important because many people are searching for that perfect supplement while ignoring one of the most powerful brain supporting tools available, and that is movement. Sometimes the answer isn't more complexity, it's sometimes it's a walk. You know, everyone says, or maybe not everyone, but there's a progression. You crawl, you walk, you run. You think of a baby, and that's how you take those first steps. Movement comes in the same order. You're not out running a marathon. You're first walking, and then you're jogging, and then you might be picking up the speed. You're training the distances that you need to train, and then you're actually doing the marathon or whatever the issue is. I'm just using that as an example. So I mentioned it briefly with sleep. That's when the brain's night shift begins, because the brain doesn't shut down just because we're asleep. Because sleep is one of the most underrated brain health strategies available. When you sleep, your brain gets to work. It's organizing information, it's processing memories, it's cleaning up waste products. I know I've mentioned that before, but you need that sleep to allow the waste products to be eliminated from your brain. And it's repairing different things within your brain. And It's recovering from whatever you need to recover from. Oh, and it's preparing for tomorrow because you don't just think in the moment. You're thinking a day, maybe a week ahead. We think in the past, we think in the um, future. We don't always stay in the present. So your brain has to think in the same way. It's preparing for the next day. And when sleep suffers, memory suffers, focus suffers, decision making suffers. So, yes, and I was going to say one more, and your mood suffers usually. It's not often that you can go sleepless nights and still be in a really good mood. You usually, your energy level kind of comes down and your mood shifts to a more, not somber, but um, maybe even irritated. I'll call it irritated. So have you ever noticed how much harder for you, or, put yourself in that? Have you noticed how much harder everything feels after a poor night's sleep? I know I do. Um, that's not weakness, that's biology. Your brain requires recovery, and sleep is one of the most primary tools to receiving that recovery that it needs. So, lack of sleep can actually add to stress. So, stress and the brain. I think we talked about stress in episode 2, maybe 3. And today we're going to connect that stress to brain health. Chronic stress. So, chronically is having your body in that high alert status for long periods of time. Your stress connects to how your brain functions, and chronic stress changes how your brain functions. It affects concentration and memory. Like I said, decision making might be a little lax. How about your patience, your mood? It all decreases a lot. The ability to problem solve. I remember when, I'll just take a small example. I had a great analyst that worked with me when I was in Afghanistan, and we worked on an investigation. He was a night owl, and I was the one getting up to answer the mail early in the morning. So I was always up by 5. I'd get my exercise in, and then I had meetings and would answer local commands as well as my own headquarters, which was in Washington, D.C. and in Georgia. So that was my schedule. My schedule had me, and it didn't have me getting great nights of sleep, but it had me getting up at 5, but usually going to bed roughly by 11, unless something else had happened. He was the kind of guy that he would probably get up at 9. I didn't monitor when people got up. So I would just, let's just say he was up much later than me. So let's say 8 o'clock, getting his coffee, getting settled in and starting his day. And then he would work till 1 or 2 in the morning. Well, I remember him coming. Then we had an investigation going, and he was collecting data, and he came in and woke me up, and the two of us had to go to another command, and I was trying to process the information he was telling me, and I had to tell him 3 times. I said, sorry, it's not connecting. I go, say it again. I think he said it to me 3 times until I finally go, okay, this is what you're telling me. I had to reiterate it to him, or tell him back what I thought I was hearing, so that he knew I understood what he said. Did I feel like an idiot? At some points, yes. But at the same time, I knew it was important. He never would have woken me up had it not been important. Number two, if I didn't clearly understand what he was telling me, the investigation could have gone off in a whole different direction. So it was imperative that I understood what he was saying. So I'm like, okay, I got it. You understand that I understand. check. And now let's move forward. And what moving forward meant was providing that information to some other people that were on the ground at the location that needed that information. Huge, right? So that's decision making, that's problem solving. That's where your brain, on less than the most ideal amount of sleep, doesn't always work for you. And realize that wasn't just the first time, but lack of sleep was one of those things that just was during a deployment. Ideal sleep is not something that you get when you're in a deployed environment. So just catching back up with what he was doing and what I was trying to do was huge. I hope that doesn't I hope you're sticking with me on that one. All right, so problem solving, patience, decision making. And the tricky thing, many high performing adults, hear this, many high performing adults have lived under stress for decades. Decades. Um, so I think of Margaret Thatcher. Um, I think she said, if I have this right, she would only get about 3 hours of sleep a night and was often running. You know, that's when she would go to bed, that's when she would wake up, wherever that was. Ronald Reagan was another. Um, Donald Trump is another that I don't know what his sleep schedule is. I just know I've heard that he doesn't get a large amount of sleep, that he operates on short bursts of sleep. So think about that. So different careers have different demands. Military in deployed environments, different demands on the amount of sleep you get and how that affects your ability to keep going. Having children, um, maybe that's why some people don't have children until later, because they enjoy their 8 to sometimes 10 hours of sleep a night, or at least the 8 hours. And when you first have children, they're getting you up in the middle of the night, which is really breaking you up. And I remember thinking when I had children, um, how wonderful it was the first night I got 3 hours, and the next time I got 4 hours, how refreshed I felt. And then by the time they were sleeping through the night, I was like, oh, hallelujah. Because you you forget how much sleep that your body needs to actually feel regenerated and feel refreshed. Um, some people stress over finances, and in that regard, or they're working two jobs, they're not getting the same amount of sleep as someone who is working one or working from home and has the ability to take breaks and walk away for a few minutes. If they're somebody with a health concern, your body responds differently because your body's either trying to fight some kind of health concern or it's trying to rebuild from a health concern. And depending on the responsibilities you hold, everybody's different on what their how their brains function in situations where they have a lot of responsibility versus situations when they don't have as much. The brain was never designed to live in a constant state of alertness, you know, that level of red, green. If you say green and you're getting your 7 and 8 and 9 hours of sleep, and yellow and orange, and then red is at high alert, where maybe you're only getting 2 and 3 and 4 hours a night, and you know that's not what your body demands, and your brain is right along with your body. So we were meant to be able to come down. So that's why recovery also matters to your brain health, and breathing and walking and time outdoors. I think people now we minimize the amount of um, importance that being in a green space, walking outside. There was a movie, so put it in the comments below. I know that my videographer will put it in somewhere if he can think of what the movie is. There's a movie where the actor's told to go out and get barefoot. It might be Pretty Woman, where he's told to take his shoes off and walk in the grass. And really, that's connecting back to nature and being outside and having time outdoors. Hugely important. It's nurturing. I guess that's the best way to put that. So focusing on your breathing, going for a walk outside, that time outdoors, or just quiet moments. If you're able to sit and just in a chair and relax, breathe, meditate, those quiet moments are huge for reconnecting with your brain and your body. And I'll want to reiterate this. Those things sound like they're luxuries, but they're not. They're necessities, and they support your brain in all strategies. So don't think of them as luxuries. Don't think of yourself as selfish, because that's usually the first word that comes up for people. Think of it as part of your recovery, part of your training, part of, you know, your daily movement, whatever that is for you, however you categorize it in your schedule. But definitely it's not a luxury. So we just said quiet moments. That's huge. Being outside, that's huge. What about connecting socially with other people? That's another one. That connection is huge for longevity and for your health. So one of the most fascinating things that researchers continue to discover is how strongly relationships influence your health. Human beings, we're social creatures. We need connection. We need conversation. You know, talking to yourself only goes so far. Don't answer yourself, but talking to yourself only goes so far. We need people to bounce ideas. We don't need people either that have the same ideas as us always. It's fun to have conversation where you can discuss differences of opinion, and that too makes you think of new things and makes your brain active and engaged. That's a good word. It engages your brain in that conversation. We do need to feel belonged, like a belonging in a group or a belonging with friends and having that friend group. And here's the harder one, I think, for a lot is purpose. You know, I think sometimes we think we know what our purpose is because we have identified it as our career. That might not be our purpose. There's something within that career, maybe that you finally identify as your purpose, but your career is probably, well, not all careers. I won't say that either, but we need purpose. And isolation can be surprisingly damaging. So isolation is hard because you know, it depends where you live. It depends, do you have health concerns? And so therefore you limit your time with other people. So you have to think about those things, that think about the people you know who seem vibrant and well later in life. You know, evaluate where they're what they're doing. Not necessarily do what they're doing, but just evaluate what they're doing. Often they're connected with a group of people, or they have great one-on-one connections with family or with just close friends. I have had a client that is connected. She's in her 80s now, and she's still connected with a woman that she knew when she was 19. Now, I periodically talk with the women that I went to high school with, a couple that I went to college with, but not on a daily basis, not on even a weekly basis. I'd say maybe a monthly basis. There's like interaction, not necessarily full blown conversations, but definitely connections. So going back to someone else, when they're older and often connected, they're involved with what's going on in each other's life, or they're engaged with each other. And that's a part of the larger system. I'd say there's something larger than themselves that could be a part of their purpose, that could be just how they connect in their community. And that's bigger than just them. And their brain thrives on that interaction. So I suppose I put that out there because I've already said that as we age, longevity is better when it's done with a larger in a larger environment. More people, more connections. That helps keep that. Well, now you know it keeps your brain more engaged, but it also is part of that longevity cycle where it just keeps you engaged with a purpose and with a community. But what happens when you retire? And if you've placed your entire identity in that career that you had, I've seen gentlemen, mostly gentlemen, especially when I was younger, that literally within, I'd say, 6 months to a year of retiring, they passed away. And whether that was influenced by health concerns or just, maybe a lack of purpose. So that's a huge conversation, because it's not something that you retire on one day and all of a sudden you have something else. So retirement, you should be having that conversation with yourself. I'd say easily a year, if not more, prior to that retirement. I had one client come to me and say all he wanted in 5 years was to be able to retire healthy and do all these things. Mostly it was travel, time with his family. There was something else, I think, as well, but all of it revolved around how healthy he was and looking forward to that time. So many people spend decades planning financially for retirement, but they never plan mentally for retirement. And they know what they're retiring from, but they don't know what they're retiring to. And that's huge. That purpose, it matters. Challenges for your brain, for your body, for all those things, they matter. And contribution matters. That goes back in some instances to purpose, but contributing to a community or to your family, which is a smaller community. But all of that matters. So when people stop learning or stop growing, stop engaging, the brain loses stimulation. That's why I encourage people to think beyond retirement. Ask, what will I continue building? Isn't that an interesting question? I think that's where I was, maybe 4 years ago. What comes beyond the business that I've already put in place, the clients that I see in person? What's the next step? And for me, continuing to build was continuing to find a retreat location and build experiences for other people that I knew I would thoroughly enjoy, and that I hoped other people would want to learn um, and participate in. So what will you continue, or what will, that's the best thing. What will you continue learning and doing? And who will you continue to serve? That's that's where that purpose comes in as well. So, what do you want to continue to build? What do you want to continue to learn? And who do you want to serve? And those things may have nothing to do with what your career was. You could have done 30 years and it has absolutely nothing to do with the direction you head in retirement. Now, I so for me, some of you know I did 30 years in federal law enforcement. I retired in 2018, and I knew, because it was important the entire time I was working, to stay physically active, physically fit, to be able to do the job that I did, to keep the stress level low. And we had weight requirements, which as I began aging became more difficult. So it actually challenged me mentally and physically to figure out what was going on with me. And menopause is a real thing for women in their 40s and 50s, some earlier and some later, but roughly in that age group. So sometimes there's weight gain, sometimes there's a little bit of brain fog, and or or more. So all those things were things that I had to deal with, and that came that kind of drew me into fitness and fitness, physical fitness, and learning about how I need to change nutrition wise, and then change, all these things in line. Because then I said to myself, well, how long do I want to live? And what am I continuing to do? And some of my clients have heard that I've decided I'm living to 125, but to live to that age, I still need a purpose. I still need to feel that I am a portion of a community, or that I have a something to someone or something to serve. And in doing those things, that's how I move forward. So, okay, you might think that's a little crazy, but that's okay. You don't have to have the same goal that I have. And my goal was technically, I suppose, a portion of what I did prior to retiring, but it has taken a huge right-hand turn away from that. I still serve people, but in a completely different environment. All right. So we keep talking about how we're feeding the brain, how we're keeping it active, how, all these things need to stimulate us so that our brain grows and still stays supportive to us, and still learns and expands and grows. So when you say feed the brain, let's talk about the nutrition aspect of everything, because your brain is incredible, and it has an energy demanding portion to it. And it requires good nutrition and good nutrients. So hydration, how many times, I think I've said this almost in every single episode, hydration is important. There's varying schools of thought, but if you can stay to start with approximately half your body weight in ounces. So if you're 100 pounds, about 50 ounces of water is a good baseline. If you're 200 pounds, 100 ounces of water. And if you're not a water drinker, or haven't been in the past, getting to 100 ounces is a lot. Um, so you need to incrementally increase it. Not that you can't do it, you can, because I can drink 100 ounces of water depending on what I'm doing throughout a day and it not negatively affect me. So that's huge. You don't want to, drink a gallon of water all in one sitting. It can overhydrate you, and you don't need that either. So it needs to be throughout a day. The increase or the consumption of protein. Most of us don't eat enough protein, so we need to consume a little bit more every day. So think about that as you're having your 3 meals. Maybe you need to supplement in the middle with high protein snacks, but definitely getting protein. That a protein breaks down to amino acids. It helps with your brain function, and it also helps all the muscles in your body. Healthy fats. There's a lot in the news lately about seed oils and that kind of thing. I have switched away from all the seed oils to avocado oil and olive oil. And because my husband still has butter, we do grass-fed butter. And otherwise, I try and stay away from butter as well. But that's just me. So all of us eat a little bit differently, but we need to eat what is ultimately healthy for our bodies. The micronutrients that you need. So that comes down to talking with your doctor and seeing where some of the micronutrients in your body might not be at the levels that they should. One of the biggest ones for a lot of us is vitamin D. And I would think, as much as Arizona has sun, I'm not really outside a whole lot when the sun is up. I'm like right now, I'm inside taping this episode. I work inside an office. I work out in a gym. I walk outside in the mornings and in the evenings, but that's definitely not enough sun. And the sun, obviously, people are concerned about melanoma and skin cancer and all that. And so they wear sunscreen. Sunscreen doesn't allow necessarily for all the micronutrients to get through your skin, which is the largest organ in your body, so that it can help your body. So maybe you need to supplement with something like vitamin D. Those again that's a blood test. That's a thing for you between you and your doctor. Think about that as you move forward. Um, and again, not perfection, just, consistency and what you need. Most people already know what healthy eating looks like. The challenge is not the knowledge, the challenge is in the execution. Smaller improvements matter. So think incrementally. Don't think, huge shifts all in one day. That's just not going to happen and not be sustainable because you have to, how is that? I don't want to say you're working into it, but that's kind of what you're doing. And they say roughly 21 days forms a habit. So give yourself grace, give yourself time, and incrementally change to a healthier pattern of eating over a month. Give yourself a month. And the hydration, same thing. Give yourself time to add in the water that's necessary, especially in the hot summer months. You definitely need that. If you like to work outside, or you garden, or you hike, or you just walk, you forget that you're using the water in your body. In a dry climate, you don't necessarily see the perspiration or feel the perspiration. It just evaporates. But the other thing that you need to realize, if you don't already, is that you perspire while you sleep. So your body is still using water or eliminating water from your system while you sleep. And therefore, I've had a couple Doctors that I follow recommend starting, as your feet are hitting the floor in the morning, that you're drinking about 16, some say 32 ounces of water right as you get up in the morning, or have that be the first thing that you're having in the morning, and then have your cup of coffee, and then have a little bit of breakfast, however it works for you. But hydration matters, small improvements at a time. Protein matters. I'm going to keep saying that. Whole foods matter. So it's better to eat the whole orange instead of the orange juice. It's better, think about that as you're going through your day. And you'll be so surprised because you'll start feeling better and your brain will notice those changes. Your brain function actually becomes better, even though you might not notice it at first. But those improvements will definitely improve your brain function. So that's nutrition. So how else do you feed your brain? Well, we feed it with a purpose, right? Having a purpose. So that's not something that's going to show up on a lab test, right? So nutrition will, but not purpose. Purpose gives your brain a reason to stay engaged, though. Purpose is a reason to plan. It's a reason to problem solve, or maybe it's just the good reason to get up every morning. I've met people in their 80s who were incredibly sharp, even into their early 90s, fabulously sharp. And it wasn't because life was easy. Not because they didn't face challenges, because they remained engaged in life and engaged with other people. They remained curious, and remained purposeful. And that's, you know, I don't know, do you pray to know what your purpose is, or does it fall in your lap? I don't know. I think ultimately your purpose becomes what you enjoy doing and who you enjoy serving. And once those two things kind of connect, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, that can be your purpose as you move forward. But purpose fuels vitality, and that's hugely important. So, how do we build a brain healthy lifestyle? So, and what does that actually look like practically? It doesn't require perfection. I'm going to keep saying that because I think a lot of people still think perfect, perfect. I have to do exactly this. And the answer is no, because that brain health, purpose, all of those things are going to look different for each one of us because we're all at different stages and at different points in our lives. And we've done different things and we are currently doing different things. So the things that we need to do better, or the things that we need to release in life are different for each one of us. So perfection, it doesn't require perfection. It requires intention, though. So moving daily, sleeping consistently. You all know I'm a techie person. So I have a watch, I have a ring, I have a phone. They all kind of tell me different things. I don't use them to say, "Oh my gosh, I didn't get all my sleep tonight," or "Oh my gosh, I thought I slept better." One is, how do you feel when you get up in the morning? And if you feel, I feel rested, and my watch might say, "Oh, you got a 70 because of this whatever reason." I went, well, all right. I don't feel that way. Maybe later in the day I'll feel that way. Maybe the reality is, I didn't get enough REM sleep, or I didn't get enough deep sleep. First thing in the morning, those don't seem to bother me as much as they may later in the day when I go, "Oh, I am kind of tired now." And so, but I'm pretty consistent about when I go to sleep. So consistently, I'm in bed, I know you're going to think I'm old and whatever. Between 9 and 9:30, 10 o'clock usually at the latest. And that's when we're out with friends, playing cards or having, dinner, whatever. So between 9 and 10. With the dogs get us up. Right now in the summertime, they're getting us up about 4:30. And that's okay, because by then actually I'm actually waking up by then as well. Um, in the wintertime, that doesn't happen. I go to bed about the same time, but I don't feel the urge to pop awake at 4:30. So, and we have shades on our windows, so it's not as if it's the sunrise that's waking me up. Um, Managing stress. There are different stressors for different people. I manage stress differently than my husband manages stress. We manage stressful situations differently, but I think ultimately we complement each other on the way we deal with whatever a situation or um, problem solving um, approaches or comes to us. So that's huge. Staying curious in whatever um, lights you up, you know, staying curious about learning new languages or about how to garden more effectively, or I don't know, everybody's different, but keeping your brain curious about different things is huge and helpful and healthy. So learn something new. So if you don't have something that you've learned new lately, consider taking up a new hobby, reading something new, and then trying to implement it. Maintaining relationships. Um, that's not always easy, but it's vastly important to not allow your I guess you could call it an ecosystem of friendships to start getting smaller and smaller. It's important to keep a lot of, I wouldn't say they have to be close friends, but acquaintances and reasons to get out. Challenge your thinking. Have conversations, not irritable conversations, but like I said, you don't always have to agree with other people, but challenge what you're thinking, or do some reading, or do some podcast listening, things that are going to change your brain and help you function at a higher level. Hydrate. Always, I'll say that. Eat reasonably well. I'll always say, if you can eat 80% of the time on a great or good diet, then that 20% that you slack, it's okay. Yeah, 80-20 rule, try and keep that, and have a purpose. Have something that makes you want to get out of bed in the morning and makes you want to um, do whatever that purpose is driving you toward. And notice how none of these things that I've mentioned are extremes. That's because longevity rarely comes from extremes. It comes from consistency. So, what does the future you look like? So, let's do something together. Imagine yourself 10 years from now. Imagine that future version of yourself looking back at today. What would you be thankful for? Imagine what what would I have wanted to tell myself? I know there's a song out there that talks about that too. But if you looked back at your version, what would you be thankful for? Who would you think? Um, would you think another crash diet? No. And another unrealistic goal? No. Another period of burnout. How's that? Overuse, over stress. doing those things? Probably not, right? You'd probably, you'd likely be thankful for protecting your health, right? Protecting your brain, expanding your brain, protecting your energy, protecting your future. And that's what we want to do here. One decision at a time, not extremes, one decision at a time. So before we wrap up, here's what I'd love for you to think about. So say this to yourself, what am I regularly doing that supports my brain health? And what am I neglecting? What am I regularly doing that supports my brain health? And what am I neglecting? Think about all those different things: stress, purpose, community, sleep, hydration, nutrition, high protein or more protein, all the things. Now, try one new challenge this week. Maybe read a book, learn a new skill, or start a new skill, start a hobby, take a different route on your walk. That changes. My husband will tell me that I'm let's go this way, we're going this way, this way, this way, and this way, done. Nope. And he changes it up on me. Do something that requires engagement. Go to dinner with friends that you haven't seen in a while. Have a conversation with somebody that you haven't talked to in a while, but that are on your mind, that you're like, I really haven't talked to that person. So do something that requires that engagement. And what I'd love for you to carry forward is your brain is not simply aging. Your brain's adapting. And the question is, what are you asking it to adapt to? Because aging isn't decline, right? How many times I say that every episode? It's a direction. And every choice you make today helps shape the future version of you. Next time, we're going to talk about something that maybe even is more important than fitness. How about purpose, community, connection, and why longevity is about much more than simply living longer. I'll see you in the next episode.